Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the FMCG Guys. I'm Daniel Torres. Hi, Efrain. How are you?
Good, Daniel. Nice to be with you as always.
Well, nice to be with you as well. We've recorded a lot of episodes this year. It's been a game-changing year, I would say, for us. By the time this goes out, we will probably have reached, not yet, but nearly 10,000 followers on LinkedIn with an audience growing towards 4,000 downloads a month. So really excited to 2024, which is not always the case when you end the year. So today to have to end the year with a bang, I would say, we have an amazing guest with a great track record, right?
Absolutely. I think this is an individual that has had a pretty diverse and prolific career, both as somebody who's worked in corporate settings, but also now as an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah, what I really like is the fact that he did corporate, working in FMCG, working in retail. You just have to check his LinkedIn, and it's really impressive. Then he went to consulting, and finally he went on to start and grow eFundamentals, which is a very well-known company and one of the best when it comes to the digital shelf. This business actually was sold to our friends at CommerceIQ last year. And now John Maltman, he's the Chief Customer Officer at the business. So I think he's someone that has a unique vantage point on the industry, partly because of his career, but also because of the conversations he has with FMCG leaders day in, day out. So he joins us today to speak of how he sees digital commerce in FMCG. What are you expecting from this conversation, Efrain?
I think there's a couple of things that I'm expecting to hear from John. I think first, like you said, digital has transformed the retail landscape. So getting his perspective and point of view in regards to what that means, not just in terms of the different players involved, but also how we think about success and metrics associated with that. So that's one thing for sure. The other thing I think is that that's also going to then lead into, if this is the new landscape that we're playing in, what are the challenges and opportunities for brands around that as well, right? So as people, as listeners to our podcast know, retail media has really just grown exponentially this past year. So I'm sure that he's going to touch on that in those topics as well.
Yeah, so to speak about this, other hot topics in the industry, and maybe other topics that seem very hot and are maybe not as hot as they seem, here's John Maltman.
Hi, I'm John Maltman. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at CommerceIQ.
Thanks for joining us, John. Great to have a Newcastle fan on the show. You're probably the first one, but probably not the first listener that is.
I'm always glad to be first. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Exactly. Well, for the audience to get to know you a bit better, what does it mean to be the Chief Customer Growth Officer at CommerceIQ?
Well, it really means to just be fascinated by customers, first of all, to champion their voice within the business, and to spend as much time as I can with customers, understanding what they're trying to do, where they want to, help them to evolve their strategies, and make sure they're getting the best service out of our products that they possibly can get. So it's really just about loving having engagement with customers and bringing that into the business.
John, thanks for joining us today. Would love to hear more about your career path in terms of what brought you to where you are today as the Chief Customer Officer at CommerceIQ.
Yeah, well, happy to share. I've been very lucky, I would say. I've had some fantastic experiences along the way. So I had 9 years at Procter & Gamble in various sales roles. I also had 9 years with PepsiCo. Ended up running PepsiCo's businesses out of Germany. I spent a bit of time with Asda Walmart on the operations board there, responsible for sort of systemic cost reduction. And I've run a couple of consulting businesses along the way, usually consulting for blue chip FMCG businesses across the world. And then finally, lately, I came to become an entrepreneur at the very final stages of my career, actually. So at the age of 55, I had a good idea, which was around digital shelf analytics, and decided to build a business from Flipchart up, and wanted to do two things: create a great product and build a great business. And with the team that I was able to assemble, we managed to do that. The business was eFundamentals. And I sold that business to CommerceIQ about 18 months ago. We subsequently integrated those businesses, and that's led me to become Chief Customer Officer at CommerceIQ.
Yeah, it's not a small thing to have founded and grown eFundamentals, a company that a lot of people in the industry know, and not actually being an entrepreneur. So that's something that I think is pretty fascinating and inspiring, to be honest.
Well, it was. One of the reasons I did it was that I wanted to see if all that wonderful blue chip training that I'd spent 30 years accumulating actually had equipped me to build something from scratch. And it turns out it did. That opportunity and quite a lot of luck turns out that I did. Yeah, so that was my motivation for going there. And we wanted to create a business that really focused on growth, both growth in revenue, but also growth in the people that were associated with it. And we managed to sort of impact a lot of people along the way doing that.
Yeah, I think that we can't ignore also the fact that during your corporate career, it wasn't like a straight line. So first of all, you left Procter, went into Pepsi, went into a market that's very different, like Germany, then went into retail. So I think that already gives you like the management acumen and flexibility to be able to do something very different, like starting your own business. No, I don't think that if you stay for 30 years at Procter & Gamble, to then start your own business after that would be very challenging normally.
I guess I know people who've done it and done it well, but that I think that what I find is that with that sort of diversity of experience, when you get into a tough spot, you've always got something to call on. You've seen it before or something like it before. You saw how other people reacted. You know what you like and what you didn't like. And I think the biggest thing is that after a while of working with really great companies, you build a set of values. And as a leader, I think that makes a big difference as you start try and build a business, is having a clear set of values that you want to operate with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that values is something that we should probably talk more about, no? Efrain?
Well, I was just going to add that I think it's even though, like you said, they're similar in that they're blue chip companies, they're fairly diverse in regards to how they operate. If you compare P&G to PepsiCo, and then you think about them moving into retail and being able to see both sides of that brand retailer relationship, it's like you said, it just expands the repository of experience that you have. And we haven't talked about, I'm sure you've built quite a pretty impressive network in terms of having worked across those companies over the years as well.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. They are all very different businesses, and I think that my time in consultancy, I've had a couple of stints in consultancy. The thing I got from that was learning how to flex your style to different organizations and to value their culture without sort of sacrificing your own values. And I think that the transition between P&G and PepsiCo was a very, very big learning point for me in terms of, how great businesses, I love working for both of them, spent 9 years at both, how great businesses can be very different, and valuing those differences and understanding when they're different. Yeah, it's a great experience. As I say, I put most of what I've done down to just good luck and having the opportunity.
Yeah, that's a very synthesized way of putting it. And talking about synthesized,
it's a very humble way of putting it too, I would say.
That's true as well. That's true as well. Looking at the retail from like your pretty unique vantage point, from your experience and also from your current role now, where you're talking to like very senior people in retail and especially in FMCG, what's your analysis of how the retail landscape has evolved in the recent past?
Yeah, I think that first of all, we went through the pandemic and the changing shopper habits that engendered, and we thought that was a big change. But I think the changes this year are as big, and what's to come is as big. And I think the three things I'd point out is, first of all, everybody wants to see accretive growth. 2 years ago, if you talk to anybody about e-commerce, it was growth, growth, growth. That's all that mattered. We'll sort out profitability later. Now it's an imperative to really get accretive growth. And that's both on the retail side and on the brand side.
Yeah. What does accretive mean, actually?
Well, so profitable growth. Profitable and sustainable growth is how I would define it. Simply buying growth with no regards to profitability is just not on the cards anymore.
What else? What other trends are you seeing?
So there's the rise of retailers as retail media networks. I know that a lot has been said about that. I think we're only at the beginning of it. I think it makes a huge difference. Both to the brands who use those networks, but to the retailers themselves. They become different businesses when they embark on retail media. And the third area is just the nature of the shopper. Folks that are hybrid shoppers now. We engage with a retailer everywhere we want to and when we want to. And what I think that brings is a lot of more informed consumers. And I think retailers really need to sort of figure out how they're going to engage with a hybrid shopper who's well informed and who defines value in a way that's important to them. It might be price, but it might also be, socioeconomic impact, that sort of thing. So I think that's a very big change. I don't think everybody has really got with that yet. I think that's still work in progress.
Interesting. So the consumer of like 10 years ago is quite different from the consumer today.
Yeah, just because they have lots of choices and they have a lot more information, and I think that, if I look at ourselves as a family, for example, we shopped heavily for groceries online for the last 3.5 years, but we found ourselves getting bored with it. It's just this. We buy the same things most weeks from our favorites list. We've started to reduce our spend on online grocery shopping. We're now spending more time back in our town, supporting local shops. We go to supermarkets and department stores to find new stuff, because I don't find the online retail is a great place to find new stuff, personally. I think when we go shopping, it's with much more purpose than it was before. It's not about filling a trolley. We can do most of that stuff online and fairly automatically. It's about discovery, treasure hunting, being informed, etc. Yeah. And very often being educated, looking for solutions as well as just looking for product.
Efrain, you deal with a lot of data in your job. And in this time of omni-commerce, do you sometimes find yourself really not sure with what actions to take?
Absolutely. I think as the amount of e-com performance data only continues to grow, a lot of brands are going to face this challenge.
Well, you should check CommerceIQ. They're a pioneer that are helping consumer brands win in e-commerce by optimizing digital shelf and helping grow market share by driving real-time incrementality for retail media and maximizing Amazon sales, share, and profit.
Sounds really intriguing. How can people find out more?
Well, you should join the hundreds of FMCG brands that are already winning in e-commerce with CommerceIQ. It's as easy as visiting commerceiq.ai/FMCG guys or following the link in the show notes to schedule a demo and download their free AI-powered Chrome plugin to optimize your Amazon listings. Don't miss out. Take action today to unlock your AI-powered e-commerce success with CommerceIQ. One question about the retail media point, because obviously we've talked a lot about it here at the FMCG guys, and I think we've come to be very well informed about it as well.
Yeah.
But there's still, I think, a lot of people that are pretty skeptical about it. I was making a post about it on my LinkedIn profile the other day. Someone commented like, kind of along the lines of, "Oh, I'm fed up of all this conversation. It's not new. It's basically like saying that it's really like just a bubble." What would your answer be to that?
Well, I think that it's worth more consideration than that, to be honest. I think that first of all, I think when you set out to be a retail media business, that is very interesting to the shareholders in the branded businesses. Because whilst I think by and large activist shareholders don't really understand trade spend and might think it's a bit high, but they don't know what to do about it. On media, activist shareholders have been particularly interested in looking at returns. And the retail companies that want to do well in this sector will have to demonstrate that their media is highly effective. And not just their online media, but the way it integrates with in-store media. And that is going to force them to become sellers of services as well as buyers of product. And in becoming sellers of service, they're going to have to understand the needs of branded businesses. Some companies have clearly already got that message. So you look at Amazon and Walmart, for example, I'd say it's very much in that message. Others are still treating retail media as another way of attracting trade dollars, basically, into their business. My view is the ones who will win will be the ones who turn it into highly effective media and therefore attract more than their fair share of media dollars. That transparency that's required to do that will give brands lots of opportunities to fine-tune where they spend money and how they spend money. It won't just impact media. If you've got highly effective media and highly effective on management of your online brands, then it will also impact, for example, where you spend your trade spend as well. So I'm very excited about the future, and I do think that we're only at the start of that journey. So I think writing it off as a finished thing is wrong. Where I do agree with the person on LinkedIn is that those retailers who are approaching just another way of getting more money from brands, I don't think that's very sustainable. I think that we're going to find that media dollars in particular get an awful lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, no, and I think that's spot on, John. And I just recall some of our prior discussions on this topic where we'd come up, like you said, it's if you think about it in terms of like from an organizational design standpoint, it requires a different skill set that some retailers don't have. So I think to your point around the ones that are going to be successful are the ones that that recognize this is different than the way that I've used to operate. And I probably need to think about new skill sets that I need to incorporate into my business to be able to do that, right? Because if you think about the best-in-class retailers, they're not born media folks. So It's like, how do you bring those two businesses together? That's going to be really, really critical.
Yeah, and I think that the ones who will do best are the ones who make the bold moves, like Walmart Connect, who create a separate business and give it a separate mission. And then of course in Europe, we are behind on that evolution. So there's a lot to learn from the US, but our path might be different in Europe as well. The other thing I think it throws up as well as organization is, are we using the right measures? So, for example, if I'm measuring, if I'm using ROAS as my measure of effectiveness for my retail media spend, the first challenge I get is every retail channel measures ROAS differently. So, is it sales of that SKUs for the next 14 days, 30 days? I've seen ROAS calculated as the sale of any SKU of the brand in the next 30 days for both online and offline sales, which seems like a very generous definition to me. So you've got this self-serving view of ROAS as a measure, but more importantly, for a well-developed brand, a lot of that sales I would have got anyway. So you're actually crediting your returns for sales that you'd have got anyway.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about, like, for example, what I've heard is incremental. Sorry to cut you off.
Exactly,
But like
exactly
incremental.
that. So how do you understand incrementality? And it requires a lot of data science to understand incrementality and measure it properly. But once you take that view, your ability to generate genuine incremental sales goes up dramatically, as does your ability to judge the performance across a whole wide range of channels and potential investment opportunities. And I think it's that will help the whole discussion on retail media to mature, is getting really quite clear about where the additional sales are and who's offering the best environment to generate those additional sales.
Yeah. So you started to allude to, like you said, that I think with things like retail media really starting to grow quite at an accelerated pace, particularly here in Europe, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for brands. I'm curious to get your perspective, in dealing with some of the leading brands that you do. What are some of the more common challenges that you find a lot of these brands are facing in this new environment that we're in?
I think the first thing is to decide, I'm thinking entirely of Europe now, yeah? The first thing is to decide, is it a priority for today or not? And if it is, how much should we be spending and where should we be spending it? It's really because the sort of the environment is still very much at early stage. There is a lack of clarity about how to build out a long-term strategy for retail media in Europe and where to invest the money. So I think for a lot of big businesses, it's those very early stage discussions about what do we actually need to do. And my view is first of all, there are some technologies that will help with that, but as important is experimentation and really trying to figure out sort of where the winning ideas are. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. It's not particularly helpful. It's not a solution, but that's what we find people working on right now. How does it go with you?
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's a fundamental question that I think you would have to ask, not just today, but in any time. But I think, like you said, where it gets really interesting is when you think about digital transformation and what that's bringing to you into, like you said, new kinds of tools that you would want to consider. And actually, in some ways, actually some fairly significant changes to your business model as well. But I think this need to prioritize, particularly when you think about trying to drive effectiveness, I think is always something that they have to consider. So I think it's spot on.
What about the people agenda? Because obviously as the media environment, the retail environment is changing, how difficult are brands finding it to attract top talent with the relevant transformative skills?
As you know, CommerceIQ, we host dinners on a regular basis in New York and in London to hear the views of folks like yourselves on a regular basis. The search for talent and retention has come up quite frequently, particularly in London, interestingly. And I think that we're in an environment where we're competing for talent, where there are lots of opportunities for talent, and everything from joining big businesses to starting up on their own and doing their own thing. And I think what we have to do is make their jobs valuable and their learning experience valuable. And what amazes me, particularly in e-commerce, is there are a lot of highly repetitive jobs in e-commerce, managing content, making sure retailers are compliant with their content standards, all that sort of stuff, that should be automated out and are sucking up too much time from really very talented people who could be working on much higher level things. So I think my view is we attract and retain talent by giving them a growth path, and we make sure that we're not burdening them with work that can relatively straightforward now be automated.
Yeah, give them a purpose, as they said a few years ago. Now this term has kind of gone out of fashion, no? But it does come out down to that a lot of times, not to give just people a good reason to get out of bed in the morning when you're talking about attracting them to the right.
I certainly think that my generation can learn a lot from millennials, and one of the things we can learn from millennials is working with purpose. And so I agree with you entirely, Daniel.
Yeah, and looking into 2024, what do you think are the most exciting opportunities for FMCG brands within this environment?
Okay, if I ruled the world, the agenda would be, first of all, I'd be really, really focused on building out my my data management. I really would think about there's lots of great services and products out there, but increasingly we should be thinking about not buying individual bits of a solution, but building towards a connected solution. And so the thinking about how to connect the technology up, and I'll give an example of it, if I may. I'll stick with retail media, but it surprises me how often I see banners and sponsored search being spent against products that are out of stock. And the reason they're out of stock is because that media purchase has coincided with trade spend investment accidentally, and because the flow of goods won't keep up with the demand that's then created. So, the technology exists for media to be sensitive to inventory. And that connection needs to be made. And you could try and make the connection using organization, but actually it's easier to make the connection using technology and joined up databases and working through those connectivities. So I think that as we strive for better profitability, more profitable growth in particular, that connecting up data sets, building the analytics that help to speed up decision making and do a lot of the and automate a lot of the routine decisions. I think those are where I'd put a lot of my effort right now. And it's, you don't have to go from where we are today to a completely integrated system tomorrow, but you should have a strategy for that, and you should have clarity about where to start. And it should be very much driven by generating better returns.
I think also for brands, and we were a bit pointing to that, there's a bit of a trend of like online, at least, from just being there to being there in the right way, to like being really like effective on the digital shelf.
Oh, I think you're spot on. And I think that for a lot of, if you take content, for example, almost all the effort goes into compliance. Now, for me, that's so making sure that what's on the PIM is what the shopper sees when they go onto the site. That's table stakes for me. And if that's still the only point of focus, then you're behind, because what you should really be working on is effectiveness. Does my content win in the key search terms, draw the eye, and drive conversion? And a lot of e-commerce teams are still in that early discussion about compliance, and it's not just with product detail pages and images. It's about banners. I see lots of banners being distributed, which are aesthetically very interesting, but will never attract the eye to them in the context they're going to be seen on a web page or on a mobile app. So I think there's the effectiveness is a big agenda item for 2024 and beyond. I totally agree with you, Daniel.
Yeah. So I think what you said, John, is spot on. And if I could just piggyback on a couple of things, I think one more as an enabler for brands, which is I think that working on your data fluency is going to be absolutely critical, right? So I think as we work towards connecting the dots in terms of the different data sources that we have internally and externally, as well as like the analytics that go with those, I think as an organization, as marketers, we need to think about how do we become more data fluent. That's definitely one. And I think the other thing that goes in my mind, it kind of goes back to the comment you made at the beginning, where you said that, if part of the challenge with online is that it's very convenient, but at the same time, it can become very routine. So I think for us, as we think about, what's next from going from compliance to effectiveness, it's really thinking about what we in Diageo have been calling creativity with precision, which is really thinking about how do you take it so that it goes back to being bring some of the delight that you have when you shop the category offline and bringing that and combining it with the convenience of online. So it's going from effectiveness to, I guess, what I would call precision, for lack of a better term.
Well, it sounds like that's about, as well as being present, driving conversion. But the added bit that I'm getting from what you've just said is building your brand. I mean, being very choiceful about what you communicate in a way that builds your brand.
Absolutely. I think it's thinking about the digital shelf, not just through a conversion. We're not holding it accountable just for being able to convert, but really thinking about how you can use it as a brand building tool as well.
That's really interesting.
For sure. So would love to get your perspective as well with regards to the trends that you're seeing from an e-commerce perspective. And, in essence, kind of thinking back to what we were saying at the end of 2022, going into 2023, in terms of what hasn't kind of, in essence, come to be or transpired, and then what you're seeing looking into the crystal ball for 2024.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that is becoming very interesting. I had a little experience last night of our fridge freezer has broken down, and quite expensive thing. And I wanted to see if I could figure out how to repair it, and could I do it myself? Because I'm a great fan of YouTube. But so I Googled the problem, and I got taken to Currys parts site. Currys being a retailer in the UK, does electronics. And from that very loose Google search, because I just basically put a photograph into Google search and explained the problem, it took me straight to the handbook for that product. And it just got me thinking, my picture of Currys as a retailer is out of date now. They clearly have figured out how to add a service level and that I wasn't aware of. So I'm going to experiment and go and visit Currys to find out and update myself. And I think that one of the things that I think the retailers are really going to become very good at is creating that experience, which is part physical in-store, part online in terms of attracting your attention, and also giving you levels of service that are above and beyond what you would normally expect. And I guess the challenge for them is, how do you communicate that? How do you get people to reassess your positioning? Because they've clearly done that particular reader has clearly done a lot of work, and I might not be a typical target for them, but I discovered it by accident rather than through anything that was pushed towards me. So I think that our local supermarket has really turned into almost like a collection of stalls. We've got they have an Asian cooking center in the center of the store where they're constantly preparing recipes and doing demonstrations and selling product from themselves. They have a fantastic deli meat collection, which is introducing new products, and they've taken as the business the whole meal replacement piece to a huge degree. So it's a combination of sort of old types of store and theatre, and I think that that whole sort of development of retail and the purpose of physical stores changing, I think, is really interesting. Alongside that, you quite often hear, for example, about brands investing in the metaverse as another experience. I'm less sure about that, to be quite honest.
That sounds very 2020 now.
Well, I was trying to get myself excited about it. So I enrolled, I built an avatar and all that sort of stuff. And it actually reminded me more of the 90s than 2020. It just, it's such an incomplete experience. Now, I'm sure, a lot of money being invested. I'm sure it'll evolve. But I don't. If I was building my brand, I'd be more interested in doing it in online retail and in physical stores and on social media than perhaps something like the metaverse. I think it's too early for spending a lot of time and effort on that.
Yeah, no, I think that it's in a bit of a halt. Sorry, Efrain, I don't know if you want to edit something, if you wanted to add something.
No. I mean, I think, like you said, it's a good place to experiment. I don't think in terms of, particularly as we think about having to drive incremental ROI, it's probably not going to be the place you're going to want to go for that, at least not now.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about digital transformation. I think that the only thing I'd add to that whole debate is that as people put together their digital transformation strategy, I think they have to be very choiceful about what they build themselves versus what they buy and what they partner with. I mean, we as a business, we have a very clear vision of building a complete solution in terms of all of the tools and services that people need to build a business in the omnichannel. But we know that we'll build some of it, we'll buy some of it, and we'll partner with others on it. And we'll not try and do the whole thing. And I do think there's a tendency to companies to think the easy answer is just to build it because we know what we want. Well, actually, you don't know what you want because that's very much an evolving feast. It's not clear necessarily what you will want or need going forward. But also, what these systems are, they can be built. What is often underestimated is the cost of maintenance and continued development. So I think that would be one piece of advice would be, yes, have a connected strategy, but be very choiceful about how much of it you try to do on your own.
Yeah, are there any other key pieces of advice that you're giving currently to your clients in FMCG in terms of what they should focus to outperform their competition next year?
Yeah, very much focus on automating stuff that can be automated. If you take Amazon as an example, a lot of what they do in terms of managing suppliers is highly algorithmic, doesn't involve people very much at all. Where it does involve people, as in account managers, the account manager is heavily guided to where the opportunities and the issues are. If you're trying to work in that system with more traditional ways of managing, you cannot keep up with the speed of decision-making that's required. So, and then you look at other retailers, some are heading in that direction, some not, but there's always an awful lot of routine work. So I think we've moved from just providing data to providing insights. I think increasingly what we're trying to do, help clients with, is point them to where the key work is they need to do now, and wherever possible, just do the work. And if you can't do it automatically, then at least issue tickets into systems that will do the work, that type of thing. So I think there's a big need for productivity, but also as the business evolves into sort of omnichannel type experiences, decision-making is speeding up and you just can't keep up with it. You're just using people. So that would be a key area that we're talking with many, many clients about.
And John, as we talked about earlier, you mentioned that obviously driving accretive growth is going to become increasingly important as we go into 2024. Are there any specific tools that you would recommend for brands to have on their radar when it comes to being able to not just drive sales volume, but also think about how do you optimize costs, your pricing, and ultimately your profit margin as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I'd go back to my earlier point is that there are a lot of very good point solutions in all of those areas. I think increasingly though, they need to be considered against, can these things evolve into connected to technology base? And the answer for some is no. They will always be point solutions. So I'd be careful about sort of making long-term commitments to point solutions, because I think that is going to evolve quickly. What we're trying to do is to build that connected ecosystem. And I'm happy to take people through how we would do that and which parts of the solution are in place and which parts are part of roadmap, etc. And we're always interested in talking to third parties about what they can bring to that ecosystem. I know that's not a direct answer, but I think my biggest point would be think about the long term as you're buying these point solutions. They need to be connected. The second bit, I do believe that incrementality and bringing incrementality to retail media management is very much a big win for brands. And the third area I would look at is tools that will help with moving from compliance to effectiveness. So, for example, it's very exciting to look at generative AI, how generative AI can take and this hasn't been built yet to my knowledge, but we're on the way to building it, can take the brand standards, the retailers' content standards, the feedback loop you're getting from shopper feedback and reviews, the buzz that's going on in social media, and the emerging trends within search results, take all of that to create content that is more dynamic than today, that will, tune product titles and product detail pages to drive conversion. So I'm very excited about that. And where we've started with that is the bit about taking shopper feedback and linking it with search results to propose automatically, no human intervention, revisions to bullet points on product data pages and to product titles to do better in organic search. So I'm aware that there's a lot of other great products in the business. I don't want to overplay CommerceIQ, but that's what we're working on for sure.
Yeah, I love the creative part because we've talked about the beginning was just about being there. Then it's about having like the right data there. And now it's about like having the right visuals, the right creative there, which is the more like artistic side, if you like, which I think is very interesting. So we talked about like the metaverse, which you mentioned wouldn't be one of your priorities if you had to recommend to FMCG brands. Are there other industry trends that you're watching right now, Serge, but you will ignore, or you're advising your clients not to invest that much in certain areas?
So I was starting to sound like a politician here. I'm going to answer the question I'd like to answer, which is I'm very excited about generative AI as a different level of search results. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that evolves over the next few months, because I think it'll evolve quickly. And I believe it's a way of giving a much higher level of utility to the shopper if it's done really well. It just doesn't become more clutter, if you like. But if it can truly know a bit about me, know a bit about what I'm doing, and provide answers and take me to places I wouldn't necessarily have gone myself, that would be, I think, really, really interesting. So I'm keen to see what happens there.
John, you've shared a wealth of knowledge in a relatively short amount of time, and I'm sure that there's people in our audience who would love to follow up with you to, like, as we said just in the previous question, kind of walk through what sort of tools they should consider in their ecosystem. What's the best way people to reach out to you and contact you to follow up?
So email, so john.m@commerceiq.ai or through LinkedIn. Excellent. My LinkedIn profile is J Maltman, so all the usual stuff before that. So either way works well.
We'll put everything on the show notes, so if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can just go to the show notes, find the email, find the LinkedIn, and I think that you're agnostic in that manner, that anyway, both ways work, no? We're customer centric. So
definitely. Yeah, both ways work.
Yeah. And we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation I really liked understanding like your career path, like starting at Procter, Pepsi as the consulting, starting your own business, selling it, and now integrating into the buying company. With all these experiences in mind, if you had to go to the beginning of your career in the early 80s, and you had to give one piece of advice of yourself or from things you've learned, what would that be?
I think it would be a bit of advice I got later on in my career, which was terrific advice, which is treat every opportunity in front of you as an opportunity to learn. Because I think developing yourself is about preparing yourself for the battles ahead. And you never know what those battles are going to be. But sometimes you're going to be called up to be a leader, and you'll draw on all those experiences. So I've done jobs that I didn't want, and I've done them to the best of my ability. I've always found the experience to be useful. And I haven't been able to predict at the time how they were going to be useful, but they have been, because they add up. And when things are tough, they all, all of that comes to the fore. So that would be my advice. Treat every opportunity in front of you as an investment in the future, your own future and your ability to be a leader.
This was John Maltman, Chief Customer Officer at CommerceIQ. Efrain, really loved that conversation, and it was good, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a lot that both us individually, but I think our audience can learn from John, given the amount of experiences he's had and how diverse they are. So for me, yeah, I really, really enjoyed that conversation.
I also learned the term accretive growth, which I didn't know before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to start to become a regular term or part of people's language in a lot of our FMCG brands.
Is that the new retail media, the new AI for 2024?
Well, I think it's going to be the success metric that's going to be used to, that's going to be applied to things like retail media. And I think just general marketing as well, which is telling me not just what you're doing in terms of growing users or growing revenue, but what are you doing to drive profitability as well? So what's the incrementality associated with this? So for sure, I think it's going to start to become part of the language. Yeah.
So as I was saying, very impressive. I mean, the fact that he became an entrepreneur at age 55 in digital shelf analytics, I mean, that's something that I love, right? It's always great to hear stories of reinvention and in this case, reinvention and amazing success. When you're building a company, fundamentals is very well known. You give it a name and you have a successful exit. And he's actually integrated into CommerceIQ, which is amazing. And I love the fact that he wanted to create a great product and build a great business, right? It's not about making money, but it's actually about having a real reason and wanting to make a difference that really guided him.
Absolutely. And I think it also speaks really well in terms of what he was saying for brands to think of as well, in terms of how they think about, for example, things like digital commerce, and I guess more specifically, their forays into retail media, which is how do you strike that balance between build, partner, or buy? And I think he's kind of pretty much lived that through his life in terms of particularly these last few years as an entrepreneur, right? Which is like choosing to build something from scratch and build this new entity, fundamentals, then choosing to partner and ultimately sell to CommerceIQ. So it really just ties in very nicely all together.
Yeah. What about, he talked about brands building towards a connected solution. What are your key takeaways in that? Because I thought that was an interesting part.
Well, I think it really ties in very nicely with thinking about what are we doing to really consider how things like digital commerce are able to drive both conversion, so actual purchase transactions, but also seeing it as a vehicle to be able to grow or build your brands as well. And then I think even on top of that was really interesting from John's comments was, are we using the right measures as a result of that to measure how effective things like retail media is in terms of delivering both conversion and brand building? So I think a lot of really interesting takeaways for our listeners in those
and
areas.
also actually linking, for example, he talked about people having banners of products that are out of stock, right? Like really having that media disconnected from what's happening in the business, and that we're going like really to media having to be really integrated into the rest, no? Because if not, you can lose a lot of value there, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, I think to me, connecting the dots about these things in terms of how you're thinking about your overall marketing, whether it be across digital channels, but even more broadly in terms of how you're playing in offline retail and how you're playing in other channels where your brands are distributed, is really critical in this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, one thing that I think we will talk a lot about in next year, I mean, I can see it coming, it's the fact of like quality content and the creative side of the content. I think that's something like going from being there to being there in style is a very big topic. And I think we'll see more and more and more of that.
Absolutely. I think that, when we think about content and we think about, for example, going back to what we used to refer things about top of the funnel or above the line type of creative, like TV commercials, there's always that element of what is this doing to really kind of engage consumers on an emotional level? What is it doing in terms of storytelling? And I think some of those same kinds of considerations are going to take a stronger hold in digital content in the years to come.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Efrain, for your takeaways. It was very useful for me to actually really remember some of the key topics we talked about with John. Well, and thanks to our audience for listening. Remember, if you like what we're doing, to leave us a review. And we have something new for you to interact more with us if you like. You can now message us on our LinkedIn page. I just got a message in right now from someone letting me know about her recent promotion, so we can make a post about it. So if there's anyone that you want to congratulate, there's any suggestions you have for us in terms of podcast or other types of content, feel free to message us. Well, actually, don't feel free. Please message us, and we'll be sure to read and respond as quickly as we can. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode.